Have you ever wondered what really goes through his mind the moment you stop talking to him? Not just the first day or the first week, but day by day as silence takes over. Most women don't realize this. Talking more doesn't always fix things. Explaining more doesn't always create clarity. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is disappear, just long enough for him to notice what life feels like without your energy. Welcome, I'm Vernon. Today we're diving deep into the subtle shifts, the unspoken realizations, and the emotional roller coaster he experiences when you pull back your words and stop chasing. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how your absence speaks louder than any argument ever could, and why it changes everything in the way he sees you. It's not about playing games, it's about emotional gravity. You pull back, and he starts to feel the imbalance. You stop chasing, and suddenly he starts questioning. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss these insights that could change your relationship dynamics. Let's explore the first eye-opening thing he experiences when you stop talking to.
Number 1. The initial shock. Days 1 to 2. You see, contrary to what many believe, men don't immediately jump to anger when faced with silence. The initial response is actually confusion, a sense of mental scrambling as their mind desperately searches for the familiar patterns they're used to. Aristotle might call this a cognitive dissonance, where the mind struggles to reconcile what it once expected with the sudden void in communication. When you stop talking, it disrupts the established rhythm, leaving him trying to make sense of the silence. It's unsettling because in relationships, communication is usually the constant he relies on to gauge emotional closeness, understanding, and connection. When that is taken away, it sends him into a mental loop, unsure of where he stands or how to react, which creates an internal tension that can leave him feeling out of control. The masculine mind, you understand, initially refuses to accept that silence is intentional. It's a defense mechanism as old as humanity itself. By day 2, however, something shifts. The confusion deepens, but it's accompanied by the first stirrings of what psychologists call cognitive dissonance. He begins to replay recent interactions, searching for clues. What did I say? What did I do? When did this start? This is where the ancient wisdom of Marcus Aurelius becomes especially relevant. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. When you stop talking to him, especially in the first 2 days, his mind begins to race. Without clear communication, his imagination takes over, and he starts building potential scenarios that often have little connection to reality. He may convince himself that you've lost interest, that something is wrong with the relationship, or even that he's done something wrong, none of which may be true. His mind fills in the blanks with worst-case scenarios, fueled by uncertainty and the sudden silence. What's happening in reality, your quiet space and personal reflection, is drowned out by the overwhelming flood of imagined fears and doubts. This mental chaos becomes far more uncomfortable than the actual situation, amplifying his anxiety and emotional unease as he seeks answers where there might be none. Have you ever noticed how someone becomes more attentive when they sense they're losing your attention? Hold that thought, because what comes next will surprise you even more.
Number 2. The reflection phase, days 3 through 5. 8 years ago, my late wife Eleanor had grown frustrated with my tendency to dismiss her suggestions about our social activities. Instead of continuing to voice her opinions, she simply began making her own plans, quietly, efficiently, without discussion. What I experienced during days 3 through 5 reveals the second chamber, deep introspection. This is where the masculine psyche shifts gears into what I call the great inventory. After the initial confusion of not knowing what's happening, a man begins to engage in a more systematic self-examination. This isn't the frantic mental scrambling of the first 2 days. Instead, it's a methodical process where he starts looking inward, evaluating his actions, his behavior, and the relationship as a whole. The Stoic philosophers would recognize this as a form of evening reflection, where one pauses to examine their day, their actions, and their emotional state. The difference here is that instead of an intentional internal practice of self-discipline, this reflection is triggered by external circumstances, specifically your silence and absence. In this phase, he starts mentally cataloging his actions, asking questions like, did I do something wrong? Is she unhappy with me? Where did I go wrong? It's a deeper, more introspective process that helps him assess where he stands emotionally and what role he might have played in the situation. Unlike the earlier confusion, the great inventory is less chaotic and more about evaluating his own contribution to the dynamics of the relationship, seeking clarity and insight. During this phase, something remarkable happens in a man's neural pathways. Dr. John Gottman's research on relationship dynamics shows that when men feel emotionally disconnected, they often experience what he terms diffuse physiological arousal. Their stress responses actually heighten their capacity for self-reflection, but in ways they typically avoid. I remember sitting in my study those evenings, genuinely asking myself questions I hadn't considered in years. When did I stop really listening to her ideas? How long has she been feeling unheard? What kind of husband have I actually been? This deep reflection is not about self-pity. It's about understanding who he is in relation to you and the relationship. He may begin to ask himself tough questions like, have I been emotionally available enough? Did I take her for granted? Do I truly understand her needs? This is an internal reckoning, a moment when the silence forces him to confront his role in the relationship in a way that's honest and sometimes uncomfortable. It's the kind of introspection that leads to growth and transformation, provided he's open to learning from it. Have you ever noticed someone around you begin this kind of introspective process after a period of silence? How did you see them change? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your experiences. But here's what's crucial to understand. This introspection is building towards something. The silence isn't just creating space for thought, it's creating pressure for change. And as we'll see in our next insight, this pressure reaches a critical point around day 7.
Number 3. The realization. Days 6 to 10. Around day 7, something fundamental shifts in the masculine consciousness. The initial bewilderment and even the deeper introspection give way to a more urgent recognition. This isn't temporary. This isn't just her being moody. Something has fundamentally changed. At first, a man may tell himself that this is just a passing phase. He might try to dismiss the silence as a temporary reaction, thinking she'll come around. She's just being emotional or moody. But by day 7, that justification begins to wear thin. The reality starts to sink in. This is different.
This isn't just a brief withdrawal or a power play. He begins to feel the weight of your absence in a more profound way. It's not just about missing your presence anymore. He's now confronted with the realization that you are choosing to stay silent, and it's no longer about what he did wrong, but about the fundamental shift in your emotional landscape. You've drawn a clear boundary, and he knows, deep down, that this is not a reaction he can simply ride out. This moment marks the turning point in his mind, the awareness that something has changed permanently. He realizes that he can no longer take your presence for granted. And that thought, it begins to trigger a deep, quiet panic, not because he's worried you'll leave, but because he's starting to fear that you've already left emotionally. Something fundamental shifts in the masculine consciousness. The initial bewilderment and even the deeper introspection give way to a more urgent recognition. This isn't temporary. This isn't just her being moody. Something has fundamentally changed. Dr. Sue Johnson's research on attachment theory demonstrates that when we perceive threat to our primary emotional bonds, our nervous systems activate what she calls protest behaviors. But in mature men, these often manifest as increased attention and genuine concern rather than demanding or controlling actions. This is where the ancient wisdom of relationships reveals its power. When we withdraw our emotional availability, not in manipulation, but as natural protection, we create what therapists call productive anxiety in our partners. It's the anxiety that leads to growth rather than destruction. But what happens next, during the second week and beyond, reveals the most profound transformation of all.
Number 4. The transformation, week 2 plus. This is where the ancient alchemical principle applies. Base metals transformed into gold through pressure and heat. The sustained silence, by this point, has done something remarkable. It has created what psychologists call intrinsic motivation for change. 20 years ago, I went through a period where I was so absorbed in my business affairs that I barely noticed my Eleanor's growing distance. She didn't argue or plead. She simply lived her life. Beautifully, fully, but without including me in the emotional intimacy we'd once shared. What I experienced during week 2 and beyond reveals the fourth chamber, genuine transformation. Unlike temporary behavioral adjustments made to fix immediate problems, the changes that emerge during this phase come from authentic recognition of what's been lost. I found myself not just apologizing for specific behaviors, but genuinely restructuring my priorities. I began asking Eleanor about her thoughts on decisions before making them, not because I felt obligated, but because I genuinely valued her wisdom. Research from the Gottman Institute shows that relationships flourish when partners exhibit what they term turning toward behaviors, small but consistent acknowledgments of each other's bids for connection. These bids can be as simple as a smile, a touch, a comment, or even an unspoken look that conveys emotional availability. The key is that both partners actively engage with each other's needs, making those small, everyday moments of connection a habit. But here's what's fascinating. Silence often teaches men to recognize these bids for the first time. In most relationships, the daily flow of communication and interaction makes these subtle moments of connection easy to overlook.
When everything feels constant, a man might not realize just how often his partner is seeking emotional connection, whether through a light-hearted joke, an unspoken gesture, or even the way she shares a problem with him. It's like background noise, always there, but not always acknowledged. However, when silence enters the equation, it creates an emotional void that forces him to confront the absence of those small, seemingly insignificant bids. With you no longer filling the space with your energy, his mind is drawn to the quiet. He begins to notice the things he might have missed before. The times you reached out for affection, the moments you needed reassurance, the quiet requests for emotional support. The transformation isn't immediate, it's gradual, like watching seasons change. But it's authentic because it comes from internal recognition rather than external pressure. Confucius taught that real knowledge is to know the extent of one's ignorance. During this extended period of silence, men often discovered the extent of their ignorance about their partner's inner world, and more importantly, they developed genuine curiosity about it. The silence forces him to become more attuned to the emotional dynamics between you two, awakening a deeper awareness of what he's missed. But next is where the real shift begins. It's not just about recognizing what's been lost. It's about the transformation that happens when that realization leads to change.
The resolution, ancient wisdom for modern hearts. I'm not advocating for silence as manipulation or punishment. The ancient wisdom traditions, whether Stoic, Buddhist, or indigenous cultures worldwide, all teach us that withdrawal of energy should serve healing, not harm. The fifth and final chamber is what I call the integration, where new understanding becomes permanent wisdom. The most powerful application of this understanding lies in what I call mindful disengagement. This means recognizing when your emotional energy is being taken for granted and choosing to redirect it toward your own growth and well-being, not to punish him, but to honor yourself. So, first, ensure your silence serves your authentic needs, not reactive emotions. Ask yourself, am I withdrawing to protect my energy or to inflict pain? It's important to distinguish between a withdrawal that comes from self-preservation and one that comes from anger or revenge. The former is about protecting yourself, creating the space you need to heal and reflect. The latter is reactive and driven by emotional impulse, a desire to make him feel what you're feeling. While it's natural to feel hurt and angry after a breakup, the real power lies in using your silence to heal, not to punish. When your silence is rooted in authentic self-care, it has an undeniable strength. It becomes purposeful instead of spiteful. And this subtle shift makes all the difference in how it's perceived by him and how it affects you. Maintain your own emotional richness during this time. Engage deeply with friends. Pursue interests. Live fully. This isn't about becoming cold, it's about becoming complete within yourself. During this period, don't let the silence become your emotional void. Use this time to reconnect with yourself, rediscover old hobbies, spend time with people who nourish your soul, or even dive into activities you've always wanted to try but never had the time for. Silence is not about shutting down. It's about opening up to your own life again and fully embracing your own energy. When you live a life that is rich, meaningful, and emotionally fulfilling on your own terms, it not only helps you heal, but it radiates outward. This makes your silence a reflection of your strength, not your lack. By filling your life with joy, connection, and personal growth, you become more centered and whole. And when you're whole, you're no longer seeking validation or healing from Him. You're simply existing in your own fullness, which is both empowering and magnetic.
As we close, remember this ancient truth. The most profound conversations often happen in silence. When you choose mindful disengagement, you're not being cruel, you're being wise. You're creating space for growth that arguments never could. Your next step is simple but powerful. Pay attention to your own emotional needs this week. Notice where your energy goes and whether it's being honored in return. Every day, take a moment to check in with your emotional state. Ask yourself, how do I feel right now? Am I being seen, heard, and valued? Pay attention to how much energy you're giving, whether it's to relationships, activities, or even thoughts and habits. Are you investing in things that lift you up, or are you pouring energy into situations that drain you? It's easy to become disconnected from your emotional needs when you're caught up in the daily demands of life or in trying to please others. But this moment, this period of silence and reflection, gives you the opportunity to reassess. If your energy is going to people or situations that aren't reciprocating, it's time to reassess your boundaries and direct your focus where it's appreciated. If this message resonated with you, like this video and share it with someone who may need a reminder of their own worth. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more empowering insights. Hit that bell icon to turn on notifications so you never miss a new video designed to help you transform your life, one lesson at a time. And I'm Vernon. Thank you for joining me today.